I have read many versions of my life on the internet in various manifestations. I have come here today to tell you that 99.999% of what you read there is not true. 42 years ago, my mother, you'll hear more of her later, went to our local post office in Kiambu town, obviously in the great commonwealth of Kiambu. And she opened our mailbox, P.O. Box 230 Kiambu, and she came back home with a letter addressed to me, one of the very few official letters that had ever been addressed to me, that referred to me as Mr. And when I opened it, it said University of Nairobi, Faculty of Law. And the dean had signed this letter as an invitation for me to come to the city and study in the Faculty of Laws. It was a life-altering, life-defining moment. And at that time, the Kenya Bus Service had started sending out a bus, number 100, to my hometown, which you may know of, which is slightly above Kiambu town. It's called Dambarai. It's a Scottish village with a golf course to boot. The Kenya Bus Service had started sending out bus number 100. And so one happy afternoon, I took my steel box and I got into bus number 100 and came down to the bus station and took a connecting flight to DTW, which is across the road. Then I walked across the road with my metal box and I found the queue in which they were registering students, and I registered my name. I met several people there who I'll mention later who became lifelong friends, and my life changed forever. Kenya is a land of opportunity. It is a land where dreams can come true. My father, James Stanley Muigai, was born in the Rift Valley because my grandfather had left Githunguri, their original home, because the land density there had shriveled after the white highlands were carved out of native lands. And they had gone into the Rift Valley to live as sharecroppers. These are people a little like serfs. You look after the Mzungu's cattle and whatever, and he allows you a little place to grow your own crops and to raise your own children. My mother came from Limuru, not so far from here. Wonderful little place. Produced some really good people, including the legendary Ngugi wa Thiong'o. My mother ended up as Adobe's assistant, the washerwoman's assistant at King George Hospital in Nairobi, where Kenyatta National Hospital is. And my father came down from the Rift Valley, having pulled himself up with his bootstraps, having studied by correspondence and got a high school diploma, came to King George to work as a records clerk, and the two met there. And contrary to popular view, I was not born in Dambarai. I was born in the native hospital, the native maternity hospital of Pumwani. Lovely little place, still alive and well and kicking, and many good men and women being born there today. Luckily, no sooner had I been born than Kenya became independent, very, very soon thereafter. And luckily for my father and others who had some education, opportunities began to open. My father started off in trade unions. He was in the local government workers union, rose to be a very agitating young man, shall we say, a contemporary of Tom Mboya, who by that time had gone into politics and so on. And so the rest is history. Soon thereafter, my father got a job in government, and we spent a good 10 years traveling all over this country where he served in the Ministry of Labor and so on and so forth. But as fate would have it, on the 10 years, 11 years thereafter, my father passed on. And a very dramatic thing happened because my mother was what today we call a homemaker. In those days, we used to call them a housewife. But my mother, as I will tell you, was a very busy housewife. She was raising 7 children. She wasn't Catholic, but she lived like a Catholic. So from being the family of a civil servant, a middle-level civil servant, living in a good government house, going to school in a good government Land Rover, we now had to depend on my mother, who had no skills other than Dobie skills, which she had long left behind her. As fate would have it, she had learned to be a seamstress. And when my father passed on, she got one of those Singer sewing machines, and that is how she raised us in Kiambu town. Now that explains how P.O. Box 230 is important. So one of my favorite photographs, I wish I was able to bring it here, was with my mother on her sewing machine, and I sitting right behind her doing the kneading, which I can still do today. I can do all these buttons. I keep telling my kids, never ever have one career. You have read many degrees, but please learn from me. If anything ever happened to me, I can settle in any country in the world because I'm a tailor. And there will always be a demand for tailors, and so on. So that's how I grew up there with as my mother's assistant. I perfectly enjoyed being her assistant. We worked mostly to supply uniforms to basically girls. So we would do the school uniform for girls. Mom would be writing in her book, this is Lucy Njoroge, and then I would be with a tape measure, and she would say, Johero, hips. Then, and she would say, Shiade, shoulders, and I would go. And then she would say, Nyodo. And then, so my mother taught me to be an artist, to recognize and appreciate the human person and the sculpture that God made in the human being. And I carry an enduring love of the art. When I finally settled at the University of Nairobi here, I'm afraid I did not spend a lot of time at the law school. I spent a lot of time here in this building. And I was telling somebody that half my youth was, how do I put it in a very genteel way, because my pastor may be listening, my wife may be listening, but I did spend an inordinate amount of time at the National Theatre Bar. This was for 2 reasons. I had a great interest in drama and theater and so on, and got into the company of people who were doing that. And I was very keen on writing. And at that time, we were supporting the Voice of Kenya with scripts, radio scripts, television scripts, and things like that. And payday from Information House, we would come straight here. You were paid in cash. So we would come up here, and the great legends of theater and arts in Kenya, I met them here as a young man, from Ngugi to Bitek to Meshere, to Rubadiri, who became a personal mentor, to John Ruganda, who was a great man, to David Mulwa, to Francis Imbuga. You can tell that I did spend a lot of time here. There must be a God in heaven, because when I finally took the exam for leading to the award of the Bachelor of Laws, the examiners took the very surprising view that I had passed. And that I had passed well. And as fate would have it at that time, another intervention occurred. The University of Nairobi had negotiated with the American government for a number of Fulbright scholarships. Another shock was to come. As I was enjoying myself at the Kenya School of Law, now which used to be on Valley Road, another letter came, again addressing me as Mr. And it said that I had won the scholarship as a Fulbrighter to go to America and study for a postgraduate degree in law. I think my teachers were as shocked as I was that the bar had been set at that level. Be that as it was, I went to Colombia. I had the greatest time of my life as a young man in New York City. Again, I cannot tell everything I saw, because as a teacher of the criminal law, I know that there are offenses that have no statute of limitation. And that both the government of New York City and the federal government and the government of the Republic of Kenya may take an interest on these matters. But believe you me when I tell you that I could not believe that this is where a boy from Eastlands, from Pumwani, had come to the most expensive law school in America and was seated next to the children of the most famous and powerful men and women in the world. I pinched myself so many times, and I would tell my colleague, who I cannot mention because he's a very, very senior judge, and it would embarrass him. But every Friday, as we bought our Heineken and the chicken wings, I would tell him, boy, we are so far from home. And so I enjoyed that. It was a good time. It opened my eyes. It frog-leaped me 20 years ahead of my generation of lawyers. It gave me opportunities that I didn't deserve. I keep saying to my American friends, I cannot recognize the country that was so good to me and is now so vicious to people needing to immigrate because it's life and death. I can assure you, had I never left Nairobi, I would never have starved. I would still have been a criminal lawyer in Makadara, Kibera, as I later did. I doubt that I have the time to tell you the stories of the cases I did and the people I met. I met murderers, I met rapists, I met homicidal maniacs of all manner. I went to prisons, to female prisons, to male prisons, to juvenile prisons, and I met human beings at their lowest points. And I spoke to people who I defended and who, after we'd won the case, they would turn around to me to shake my hand, and I would be holding my briefcase and walking away. Because I thought they were the lowest of the low, the scum. But that is the work that I did. I enjoyed it very much. I would never, ever have thought of becoming a lawyer. I hope I have this little moment. My Auntie Mary, God rest her soul, a very vivacious lady, she had become one of the pioneer farmers in Limuru, African farmers, to have great cattle. And my uncle, poor Uncle Paul, now with our Lord as well. I doubt as happily as Auntie Mary is. For reasons that I will explain shortly. The big, huge highway going to Naivasha then came and took a chop of their land. And Uncle Paul was paid this amount of money. He immediately, not unfamiliar, he immediately left home. He bought a small car, and he got a new wife. And so Auntie Mary rushed home to see my mother, who, having lived with my father for that long, was a very more knowledgeable about the ways of the world. And so he says to my auntie, you need a lawyer. And so Auntie Mary, my mother, and I am my mother's handbag in those days, we are off to Nairobi, off to Jivaji, off to the office of a man called J.K. Kamere. And so as we are sitting here, my mother goes in with my auntie, they talk to the lawyer and so on. He comes out, he has a 3-piece suit. And I asked my mother, what does this fellow do? My mother says, he's a lawyer. And what does that mean? He speaks for other people. It doesn't make sense. I forget it. We go home, I go on with my life. I begin high school, long holidays, I say, I need to entertain myself. I go down to the law courts. And I listen to the lawyers. S.M. Otieno, white, all white hair, smoking long white cigarettes. And Byron Georgiadis and all these ones. And they keep talking, and they don't fear the policemen. They're asking all those questions. And I said, look, there's something here. But what really made it was a young magistrate called Emmanuel Okello Okubasu comes to Kiambu and becomes the first black man to sit there as a magistrate. And he comes to court, and everybody bows to him. He's in another set of 3-piece. And I said, what is these people with 3-piece? And then he hears some cases. Then he stands up and he says, gentlemen, I will hear the rest of the matter in chambers. I said, no, this is it. These are my people. I must have a 3-piece. I must be in chambers. I can't be in an office. And from then on, I tried working to go to chambers. So when I got the letter to invite me here, I was coming to be the best lawyer that I could be. I wasn't going to compete with anybody else. I was going to compete with myself. And I was going home to become the SM of my generation. Life surprised me. I went to Colombia, came back, I became a teacher. I have this feeling now that when my obituary is written, the place for lawyer may be small and may be overshadowed by the place for teacher. But I take great solace in the knowledge that some of the best people I have known have been teachers. And some of the best people who have left an impact on me have been teachers. Here at the university, I fall under the influence of a gentleman I can mention because he's no longer in public office, called Willie Mutunga. So I'm a young protege, and we spent half the time at Snow Cream having coffee with the teacher giving me personal, and that's before he's quickly whisked away to detention. Another story that I have no time to tell. I wish I had the time to tell it. Next to Snow Cream was the dealership for Alfa Romeo. So each time we left Snow Cream, I would stop there. Willie, my teacher, socialist, not needing much in life, comfortable with. He had a Toyota, which he allowed me to drive, pick up his kids from school. I would look at the Alfa Romeo and say, one day, I must walk into this place and not walk out, ride out. So the immense treasures of this country, a boy from Eastlands, again, is able to live his dream. Fast forward, practicing law, teaching law, agitating with the generation, my generation, little things that would surprise you. We are asking the government. We are begging the government. We are not demanding, not haki zetu. We are begging the government that people should not be detained without trial. That's where we started. Please, government, we are begging you. That's where we started. And we moved on. My generation, today I get the impression that we are moving faster than, which is a good thing. And then when that got into the pocket, we went to another one. And we stopped the language of we are begging. We said, now, we want multi-party. We want. Scafo. We demand. And the rest is history. We went, multi-party came, the new constitution came. I went to serve in CKRC. I spent 4 years of my life there writing the constitution with greater men than myself, and women, of course. I spent a bit of my time on the preamble. I love it. I think it's the best poetry next to our national anthem, and so on and so forth. And one day, I end up in government. I never thought I would be government. Government was the body we talked to and talked with. One day I woke up and found that everybody is talking to me. And not politely. So we demand, you people, you are insensitive, and so on. And then, so I did my best. 7 years I was there. I tried my very best to be an ethical lawyer, to be consistent, to speak quiet truth to power. Power doesn't like a lot of noise if you are in the inside. So you have to learn to whisper so that your voice carries some. And so I spent 7 years there. I dined with kings and queens and presidents and prime ministers and senators and all manner of people. And each time I pinched myself and said, a boy from Eastlands. The rest is history. Good evening.